Hey everyone, welcome back to TechCravers. Today we're checking out the Anbernic RG476H, another entry in what's become a pretty large family of handhelds based on same internals, including the RG556, the RG Cube, the RG406H, 406V, and the RG Slide. So yeah, if you've used any of those, you probably already know what to expect in terms of raw performance. But what makes the RG476H stand out is mostly its design, and we'll get into that in just a bit. I've been using this Indigo model, and just to be clear, mine arrived without any preloaded games. You can technically buy it bundled with microSD cards full of ready-to-play titles, but personally I'd steer clear of those. They're rarely well organized, often filled with shovelware, and there's always that grey area when it comes to legality. I'd much rather set things up myself with my own game dumps and a clean front end. Anyway, there's still a lot to like about this handheld and a few things I think are worth pointing out, so let's break it down and see where the RG476H fits into Anbernic's ever-growing lineup. Now let's jump into it. Okay, the first thing that stood out to me when I unboxed the RG476H was the design. Because this one has a fully glass-covered front, glossy, bezel-free and modern. Now, Anbernic doesn't always go with this kind of finish, but lately they've been leaning into a more polished aesthetics on certain models. And I'd say that this one lands somewhere right between premium and budget, a pretty sweet spot if you ask me. I have the Indigo version as you can see, and it looks even better in person. Build-wise, it's solid, the chassis has minimal flex, the buttons feel tight and responsive, and overall the unit just gives off a well-built vibe. Now, mine didn't come with any games preloaded, and that's actually something I like. Sure, you can buy it with a 128 or 256GB microSD card packed with games, but personally I prefer starting clean. That way you avoid low-quality ROMs or weird shovelware, and you're also encouraged to use your own legally owned game backups, so no complaints from me there. And just from handling it briefly, you got stacked shoulder buttons, dual analog sticks, and a 4.7-inch IPS display with 4:3 aspect ratio, and a high 120Hz refresh rate, which we'll come back to a bit later, but overall the first impression, pretty solid. Alright, let's break down what's actually inside the RG476H. Because while it shares chipset with several other Anbernic handhelds, the overall spec package here might still be worth going over. At the heart of this device is the Unisoc T820, the same chip we've seen in models like the RG556, RG Cube and RG Slide. It's a solid performer for Android-based retro gaming, especially paired with 8GB of RAM and 128GB of internal storage. And you also got the microSD card slot if you need more space for your game library. Now the screen is where things get a bit more interesting. This is a 4x7-inch custom LTPS IPS display from BOE running at crisp 1280x960 resolution. That's a true 4:3 aspect ratio, ideal for classic console and handheld emulation. And it supports up to 120Hz refresh rate as I said before, and is that overkill for retro titles? Well, maybe, but it does make the UI and supported games feel noticeably snappier. Peak brightness is rated at around 500 nits, which is fine for indoor use, though like most of these devices, direct sunlight isn't going to be its strong suit. Contrast sits around 1200 by 1, which gives you decent depth and color accuracy, especially for a panel in this price bracket. Powering it all is a 5000 mAh battery, which, depending on your usage, should get you a good 5 or 8 hours of playtime on a single charge, and it has USB-C charging as expected. And as for pricing, the RG476H launches with a retail price of $165. That puts it firmly in the premium retro handheld category, but not into the wild territory like some of the more experimental handhelds we've seen lately. If you catch it early, there's an early bird price of $150 during launch, which is honestly a fair deal considering the hardware. And of course you'll find links to where you can buy it in the video description down below. So yeah, not the cheapest handheld out there, but certainly one of the more well-rounded options if you're looking for a blend of sleek form factor, good performance and solid battery life. But now back to that sleek display, because it's honestly one of the first things that stands out when you power on the RG476H. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a 4x7-inch LTPS panel with a crisp 1280x960 resolution and more importantly that true 4:3 aspect ratio. And that might not sound super exciting in 2025, but if you're like me and spend a lot of time with classic systems like SNES, PS1 or older arcade games, this aspect ratio makes a huge difference. You're getting the exact look that those games were designed for without weird stretching or black bars. The 120Hz refresh rate also deserves a quick nod. Not every emulator or retro title is going to fully take advantage of it, but for UI navigation and supported games, it gives the experience a more fluid feel. And if you're sensitive to motion blur or ghosting, it helps smooth that out too. Now, paired with that display is a really solid control layout. The RG476H features stacked shoulder buttons, which makes it versatile for everything from 16-bit platformers to PSP and even light Android gaming. You've got dual analog sticks with Hall effect sensors, which is also great to see at this price point. And overall, the buttons feel very good. The D-pad is clicky but responsive, the face buttons have that slightly soft but snappy feel that Anbernic tends to aim for, and the triggers are easy to reach without cramping your hands. Nothing feels loose or unrefined, it's all dialed in. So let's talk some performance. Since the RG476H runs on the same Unisoc T820 chip as the RG Slide, RG Cube and a few other recent Anbernic handhelds, you can pretty much expect the same kind of results here. That means it'll breeze through NES, SNES, Genesis, PS1 and most PSP titles without breaking a sweat. Even Dreamcast emulation is solid on this chipset. And yeah, surprisingly enough, a lot of GameCube games also run really well, which I have to admit feels pretty fitting on a handle that's literally the same color as the classic Indigo GameCube. But let's be real, this is not a PS2 handheld. I tested Burnout 3, God of War 2 and a few other games to push the hardware, and yeah, not great. Even after cranking the performance profile all the way up, I couldn't get either of them to run smoothly. So if PS2 emulation is a big selling point for you, you might want to look elsewhere or temper your expectations. As for Android performance, it's fine for general use and lighter games, but this isn't a device built to run modern 3D Android titles or competitive shooters. This is a retro machine first and foremost, with a bit of extra muscle under the hood. Thermals are pretty well managed though, there is a fan and under load you can definitely hear it, but I wouldn't call it loud or annoying. And yes, pushing the display at 120Hz and max brightness does affect battery life, so some tweaking might be needed if you're planning long sessions. But overall, for retro gaming, especially up to PSP and GameCube, this device is more than capable. Just don't expect miracles with PS2 or heavier Android stuff. Now, not everything is perfect, so after using the RG476H for about a week, here's my honest take on what works well and what doesn't. First off, the screen is beautiful indoors, no doubt about it, but in bright daylight, especially direct sunlight, it struggles. Even at the advertised 500 nits, it's not the easiest to see clearly. Something to keep in mind if you're planning to play outside often. Like I said earlier, the T820 chip is solid for most systems, but let's not pretend it's a PS2 powerhouse. I personally had a rough time getting Burnout 3 and God of War 2 to run smoothly, even with the CPU set to high performance. So if your primary goal is flawless PS2 emulation, this probably isn't the right handle for you. That said, I've had really good experiences with several GameCube titles, which feels fitting, especially considering the Indigo design. The 5000 mAh battery is decent, but it's important to manage expectations. If you're running the screen at 120Hz, keeping brightness at high and playing more demanding titles, expect closer to 4 or 5 hours of use, but under lighter conditions it stretches further, but don't expect miracles. The stacked shoulder buttons work fine, but depending on your grip and hand size, they can sometimes feel a tiny bit cramped or hard to press distinctly, especially during longer sessions. It's not a deal breaker, but worth noting. Now, what I really like with the RG476H is the 4.7-inch display. It's a total win for retro gaming. It makes SNES, PS1, arcade titles, or basically anything designed for 4:3 aspect ratio look exactly as they should. It's sharp, fluid, and thanks to that 120Hz support, it just feels right. It has great value. For around $150 or $165, you're getting a really well-built handle that offers similar performance to more expensive devices. I love the Indigo version. It stands out without being flashy, and because I didn't get a unit preloaded with games, everything felt clean and ready for my own library. It's a better experience, and you avoid all the weird junk ROMs or questionable file dumps that often come with preloaded cards. Running Android 13 means you're not limited. You can install any emulator you want, use streaming apps like Moonlight or Xbox Cloud Gaming, or just tinker with your own setup. It's flexible in a way that Linux-based handhelds just aren't. Hall effect analog sticks, stacked triggers, and a nice button layout. Everything you'd expect from a modern handheld is here. Alright, that's my review and first impressions of the RG476H after using it for about a week. It's a handheld that tries to balance premium design with a sensible price, and for the most part it really pulls it off. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, it really helps the channel. And if you want more retro handheld coverage, comparisons and tutorials, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell. Let me know in the comments, do you prefer a device that comes with preloaded games, or would you rather start with a clean slate like this one? I'm curious to hear what you think. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.